If you want to present, the button is on your right hand top.
Oh, I see it. I see it.
Yeah.
There we
go. Okay, you can start. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. My name is Alexis Gonzalez. I'm a doctorate student in School of Computer Science. I'm currently working under Raju, and I specialize in hard systems, particularly in caching. So today I have a presentation on decentralized blockchain with high throughput and fast confirmation. Okay. So to start off, we have to explain what is a blockchain. A blockchain is essentially a decentralized distributed data structure containing records, which are known as blocks, which are linked linked to its previous block. As such, they will create a chain as you add more blocks. The first block in the chain is known as the genesis block. In order to increase the size of a blockchain, participants within the network are tasked with solving logic puzzles known as proof of work in order to obtain the right to make another block. Blockchains control the rate at which how many blocks can be created at a given time by controlling the difficulty of the puzzle. When a blockchain is created, it is distributed across a network. Each peer on the peer-to-peer network contains a copy of the blockchain. Because of this, there is no centralized data location where an attacker could obtain and manipulate the data. In order for an attacker to gain control of the data, the attacker has to gain control of over half the network. However, due to the fact that it's a distributed peer-to-peer network, some issues exist. With blockchains, the first major issue would be forking. Forking occurs because since data isn't instantly transmitted, copies aren't instantly transmitted throughout the network and have a latency delay, there is a chance that two particular nodes on the network will each create a block for a blockchain. When that happens, you end up with a fork in the record, where two different records for a given block connection. And so one of the major problems is trying to figure out how to decide which of the forked paths do we want to attach future blocks to. Another case of blocks being added to the chain is if an attacker attempts to add his own block to a particular part of the chain. In order to solve an issue, the network as a whole needs to decide on a consensus algorithm in order to figure out which fork the network will use. Bitcoin and Ethereum use two different consensus algorithms, which we'll be going over next. Bitcoin is built off of the Nakamoto consensus. The Nakamoto consensus is based off of longest chain priority. So when there's a split in the record, the way that it's determined which chain wins priority is whichever one happens to be longest at the time. So in this example, since the green fork here has a longer chain, all new blocks would be added to this particular path. There are issues with this design. The first major issue is that it is vulnerable to a double spending attack if it has too fast of a generation time. What that means that if the network generates too many blocks, it is easy for an attacker to take advantage. As a result, it requires an extremely low block generation time in order to prevent the attack. Additionally, concurrent blocks also lead to large resource waste because they do not contribute any weight to the longest chain. Once the longest chain is determined, any smaller chains made prior do not contribute anything to the network. To explain what a double spending attack is, imagine if you have a network here, imagine you have a blockchain here, and this is the longest chain. Let's say that this chain happens to have 20% of all the blocks within the network. Due to smaller chains being made at other points in the network. And let's say an attacker wants to revert the records all the way back to a specific point in the chain. All an attacker would have to do is gain control of more than 20% of the network and then start adding blocks to the record that he wants to go back to. This is weaker than allowing, this weakens the network since you've lowered the requirement of control from 50% to 20%. To solve this issue, a ghost consensus was created and is the consensus algorithm used by Ethereum. This algorithm focuses on largest subtree. So the idea here is that on every single fork, the system will decide which subtree is the largest. In this case here, it was first choose this large red subtree, and then followed by this chain here, since it's the next longest subtree. While it does allow a higher block generation rate than the previous consensus algorithm, Ghost still requires limits on the generation rate since it is vulnerable to a liveness attack. However, first, the reason why Ghost is resistant to double spending, unlike the previous one, is that in order to revert back to a particular point, since unlike longest chain rule, the offshoot smaller chains do contribute weight to this subtree. So if an attacker wants to go back to this particular point, he would have to fight against a larger percentage of the network. You would have to gain more control, and usually it's more control than more than 50%. However, the other type of attack now is Aliveness Attack. This exploits an issue with how a network has latency, doesn't have instantaneous communication speed. In this example, let's say two subgroups within the network are adding blocks to their chain, and an attacker manages to see that there's two separate chains being created, two separate subtrees being created. In order for a particular subtree to be confirmed, the entire network essentially needs to accept the same subtree. In order to prevent the network from confirming which one of the two subtrees is correct, what a liveness attack does is that the attacker will hold back blocks until he sees a situation where the blocks are pretty much almost even, and then he will keep adding to a subtree. So in this case, he will add a new block to this subtree to make this subtree longer to attempt to keep them equal. By keeping them equal, this system as a whole cannot come to a consensus on which subtree to use. To counter this, an augmentation to Ghost was made. This is called Structured Ghost. It's really similar, except that blocks are randomly chosen to be weighted. The way they're randomly chosen is usually how many zeros are in the solution back for the mining puzzle. It's how many, it's typically how they're chosen. Other than that, subtrees are now selected via weight instead of total blocks. In this case, this block here will gain control because it has one weighted block, whereas these silver blocks have no weight. Because of this, liveness attacks are harder to create. This is due to the fact that the person committing the attack would have to have enough control of the network to create more blocks in the network as a whole. The issue the issue of structured ghosts is because of this, the confirmation speed is impacted. So the amount of time it takes to confirm that a particular branch is correct is significantly larger. And the reason for this is because it requires a wait. So anything unweighted past the point is not confirmed until there's a wait added somewhere on the network. The way conflicts go is to try to get the best of both ghost and structured ghost. And the way that it manages it is by essentially applying both of them at the same time, swapping depending on whether or not it detects an attack. So to begin with, conflict starts in standard ghost mode. And what it does here is that blocks are given a weight of 1 to represent that it's one block. And this continues on until it reaches a point where an attack is detected. When an attack is detected, it swaps over to structured ghost, essentially. Now, this is only applied to new blocks being added past this point. The previous blocks aren't changed. From here, the blocks are given a weight depending on their solution randomly, and this will keep going until conflicts has determined that one of the trees has gained priority over the other. So first, to explain when it determines when the swap. It determines when the swap, whenever you add a new block, the algorithm looks at that block. It looks at the tree that it's being added to. The first thing it asks is, does the weight of the planned added subtree, is it not that much larger than the other? So if we go back before this point, let's say I add this block before this one existed. At this point, let's say I add to here. It looks at the subtree that it's connected to and goes, well, this subtree here and this subtree here are pretty close to even. Because of that, that would be the first qualification. The second qualification is the subtree split old enough? This one exists just in case, because they don't want to implement it right away when it's first being created, and they also don't want to do it when it just happens to be a small split. But in a liveness attack, this tends to go on for a while. So once a significant amount of time has been achieved, and once both conditions are hit, it swaps over and starts adding to randomly selected weights. The system is guaranteed to eventually swap back. And the reason for that is when you go to a limited weight system, it is the amount of blocks that are considered weighted is very limited. Even if an attacker had chose to withheld a large amount of blocks before starting the attack, eventually he will run out of blocks, and the system will balance itself out due to random blocks being added. As you see here, once it determines that enough of a weight has been reached, in this case, it swaps back to assigning everything one weight, a weight of 1. So this is a basic overview of the result. As you can see here, first we're going to look into confirmation speed, which is how long it takes to confirm. Conflicts is slightly, so on the bottom here, we have how many blocks are being, the speed of block generation. In this case, once every 30 seconds, and in 16 over here, it's 16 per minute, 2 per minute to 16. As the confirmation speed, as you can see here, while the confirmation speed is slightly slower than standard ghost confirmation because occasionally it swaps to a weighted system, it's pretty close to what Ghost is. So it still maintains a high confirmation speed. The big advantage over Ghost comes from the amount you could produce per second. As you have a faster block speed due to the issues of liveliness attacks being fed by high block speed, Ghost effectiveness drops down in throughput over time, whereas Conflicts is able to maintain a significantly higher throughput and doesn't reduce throughput. So that's my whole presentation. Anyone have any questions?
Okay, Alex, thanks for your presentation. It's